Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs and today I have some almost Christmas cards to share with you. So let's jump right in. So I call them almost Christmas cards only because they're Christmas cards in everything but sentiment. And we'll get there when we get to the sentiment. But to start, I did cut down 2 pieces of cardstock. This first one is a soft navy by Simon Says Stamp, and the green one, I'm actually not sure where I got it. It was in my stash and I really wanted a piece of green cardstock, so I'm not sure what company made it, but any cardstock out of your stash would work for this card. And then I'm just cutting it down to slightly smaller, about 1/4 of an inch smaller than my A2 size base. So here you can see you just have a bit of a white border on each side, and then your panel will sit in the middle there. I just like adding a white border. That's just kind of my thing. By all means, you could make this the size of a A2 size front panel, and then it would just have no white around it, which is totally cool too. It would look good. So I brought in 2 Oxide inks for each colored cardstock. For the soft navy, I have chipped Sapphire and black Soot. And this is only to kind of draw your eye to the center, also to add a little bit of dimension around the cardstock. So I start with the chipped Sapphire to kind of bring in a color around it, and then I bring in the black Soot around that. And the black Soot is a very minimal. It's just lightly kind of touching the cardstock on the sides there. I don't really want it to be super dark. That's not quite the focus, but it adds a little bit more drama to the cardstock, which I really like. I think that it ends up really framing whatever you put in the center beautifully. So there is a lot of heat embossing in this card. Stamping and heat embossing is pretty much the only thing. Oh, there's a little bit of die cutting as well, but it's pretty much just a lot of heat embossing. And then for the green panel, I used Rustic Wilderness and black Soot. And again, it's the same thing. I'm mostly just trying to create a bit of a center highlight so that it really pulls your eye into the center of the card. And you'll see in the end why that's kind of helpful, just because of the snowflake that adds in the center. It just really draws your eye into the center and kind of creates a really neat kind of almost glow in the middle, if that makes sense. And I like how that looks. I have a tendency to do this usually pretty much every Christmas on some kind of a card design. I love how it looks, so that's kind of where I end up going with it. But you could absolutely not even do the blending. You could just emboss, in this case, snowflakes around the card, and I still think it would look stunning. This is just something that I enjoy adding into my cards, so I kind of end up going that direction regardless. But it's just adding a little more drama to a very flat piece of cardstock. I like to add depth and dimension to my cards, so I have a tendency to do something like this in this instance. So I brought in the Simon Says Stamp Snowflake Seasons stamps, and I will use the dies in the end for the big snowflake. And I just picked out the one big stamp, which is at the top there, and then a ton of little snowflake stamps. We're going to add some more even after this. I just felt this was the easiest way to stamp them all kind of at the same time because we are going to heat emboss them. So I stamped them down with my embossing ink onto and I did use an anti-static powder tool. I live in a very dry climate, a very humid climate, so I have an issue with static quite often. So I just used an anti-static powder bag, and you can see some of it on the background. That's not a problem. We can wipe that off later. Like, there's no issues there. So I have a tendency to add a bit of embossing. And if you want a more in-depth look at embossing specifically with an embossing powder tool, I did a video last Christmas, I believe, where I went through like my steps on how to get a really good emboss. I'll have it linked in the card if you want to check it out, but make sure you check out the videos in this hop first. This is a part of the Holidays in July hop. There's a lot of great creators in here. I'll have the next person in the hop linked and listed down below underneath my video in the description there. Go and check out all the creators in this hop. I think you're going to find a lot of really neat holiday cards. So yeah, so I just heat embossed with gold embossing powder. This is Gilded by Brutus and Monroe. And then I brought my powder tool back in, and I'm just going to add a few extra snowflakes here and there on the cards. But for this, I'm just going to use a small acrylic block and just stamp them down myself in random areas. You could use the Misti for this if you kind of had an idea where you wanted them. And every card is going to be done the same. Both cards. There's only the 2. They're pretty much the exact same, so I'm only going to show you the steps on one of the cards. for like the heat embossing and whatnot. So I am going to stamp down the little stamps, and I kind of like to hang them off the edge as well. That just kind of gives the idea that there's more going on outside of the panel, more than what you can see. And I think that that really helps add more whimsy to an image, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the right word quite, but it just kind of creates like there's more to the card than just what you can see. I also really like how it looks when you kind of have stuff hanging off of the edges. So I have a tendency towards that as well in pretty much every card that I make. But I also have a tendency to make borders on things. So I think we kind of get into what we really enjoy and then kind of stick to that. And that's one thing I enjoy. I like images hanging off of the cards so that it kind of adds a little extra to it. But yeah, so I just stamped out a few of the extra snowflakes to fill in the space at the bottom there, because these are the ones that are already on the background. I had to pull them off the Misti to stick them down. And it's the same Gilded embossing powder, and I'm just going to heat set these as well after I do both panels. And I am also going to add a gold border around it, which I'll show you here in a second after I heat set these little snowflakes. So make sure you guys check out the other people in the hop. I know I just mentioned that, but make sure you do. There's a lot of wonderful creators that join in these hops, and I think that people kind of just watch people that they watch anyways, and you might miss out on some great other creators out there. Like there's always a lot of new creators coming up, or there's creators who just join in these hops for fun, because there's so much fun to join in these hops. So make sure that you actually take the time to go and check them out. And if you like what they've made, leave them a like, leave them a comment. If you like what they're doing, consider subscribing. I think that we all greatly appreciate when people want to kind of continue on with us and kind of check out what we're doing and what we're making. And make sure you stop by and do that. And also a big thanks to Monica. Thank you so much for setting up the hop. Greatly appreciate that as well. So as you saw there, I just dipped my panel into the embossing ink on the sides, and I've got a very thin gold border going on here. I didn't want a thicker one. You absolutely could do a thicker one and just kind of pounce it to the front more than I did there, but I only wanted a very, very light frame, because it kind of just finishes off the panel in my opinion. And then here I've got some heavyweight vellum, and I'm going to gold heat emboss a big snowflake on it. So exact same steps. I use my anti-static powder tool. Now this is a very heavyweight in vellum. It's a 40-pound vellum, and I have everything I use linked and listed down below if you're ever curious what I'm using. But it embosses beautifully. You just have to make sure that your heat tool is pretty warm before you bring it to the vellum. I haven't had any issues with warping, and you'll see here because I'm going to heat emboss the snowflake, and I had a little bit of embossing powder kind of stick to the top of that, and I just brought in a dry brush and just brushed it off. I am also going to die cut this, so like heat embossing outside of the image really wouldn't have been a big deal, but I did just kind of wipe it off, and I had no problems there. So I'm kind of just warming up my heat tool here. Sorry, there's nothing in the frame that you can even see. I'm just preheating my heat tool, and I wanted to leave this in only to show that if you preheat your heat tool, you're less likely to warp even your cardstock, but in this case the vellum. So there I had no issues with warping at all. I just heated up my gold snowflake and then embossed it, and no problems. And I am going to put this through my die machine. This is the matching die set. This snowflake is also from the Simon Says Stamp Snowflake Season Stamp Set. And this is just the coordinating die. And I'm just going to put that through my Gemini and bring it out the other side and then pull it out of the die there. So this is going to be kind of the focal image on top. Now, the only reason I say that this card is almost a Christmas card is because in the end I opted not for a Christmas sentiment. I opted to use a sentiment that says miss you. And that's only because I wanted to send this to somebody who I very strongly miss right now. And you could absolutely have done a Christmas card here instead. It could say Merry Christmas, it could say Happy Holidays, it could say whatever you'd like for a Christmas card to say. That's completely up to you. This is what I opted for the sentiment to be, and that's why I'm calling it kind of an almost Christmas card. Every other image or part of this card is pretty much Christmas themed. I just chose to do a sentiment that wasn't really Christmas themed. Although, I mean, I miss winter. Does that count for anything? I don't know where you guys are, but I live in Canada, so we have a pretty great winter here, at least in the part of Canada that I live in. And this week has been 33 degrees Celsius. Now, sadly, I don't know what Fahrenheit is. because we do Celsius, but for where I live, the area that I'm living in, that is very, very hot for us. So it's been very hot and uncomfortable for the last little bit, and I honestly, right at the moment, miss snow, just because I love snow. And I also love snowflakes. That's just kind of my thing. But that Miss You sentiment was from the Simon Says stamp, Delicate Flowers stamp set. I just pulled it out of there, and that little circle die was from the same Snowflake Season stamp set. It's just a die to cut an image out of that set, and that's just what I chose to put in the center. And I stamped it out in some Golden Glitz Delicata ink, and then I brought in my Barely Art glue, and I'm just going to adhere things down. And then I also brought in some 3D foam squares, which I put in the center of the snowflake just to give it a little more depth and dimension. And I only put it in the center because I didn't want glue to show through the vellum. I do find that can be a bit of an issue, and I wanted the kind of edges of the snowflake to be able to stand up from the base. So that was just a design choice there. You could absolutely adhere this down flat, and that would look beautiful too, I think. And I just hold it up to make sure that it's actually straight. And then I adhere it down with just a push on the center. And because it's me, and because I love all the things sparkly, I had to add some gems. So I brought in some Studio Katia sparkling crystals, and I just excuse me, I just adhered them to the center of some of the bigger snowflakes. I think I put 7 altogether because I always do uneven numbers. I just find that that's more appealing to the eye, and sorry, my head's going to pop in the corner there for a second. But yeah, I have a tendency towards uneven numbers, so I added 7 gems, and I made sure that they all kind of were in center of a snowflake, just because I thought that would look really pretty. So I mean, at this stage, you can see like how the darker edge kind of leans towards the center, but again, it's not necessary. It's just something that I like to add. I think that even if you had left the cardstock, just the cardstock, it would have looked really pretty. I think the card just lends itself to be quite pretty in its own. But that is the card I have for you guys today. I'm going to hold them up here so you can check them out in all their glory. I hope that you'll go and check out the other videos in the hop and consider subscribing, considering leaving some likes and some comments. We really appreciate them, and I really appreciate you stopping by to watch my video. Thank you so much, guys, and I cannot wait to see you again. Bye-bye for now.